Infinity Nikki should be everything I want in a live service game. I'm the target audience. I love styling, I love exploration, I love the world. It's a game that respects its protagonist, Nikki, and all other female characters. There are so many times I've felt interested in trying out a different live service gacha, only to be put off by its character design because I don't like using the term fan service because whatever service they're providing, I'm not a fan. Infinity Nikki doesn't do that. It feels like a safe space. I should have loved this game. I wanted to love this game. But why does its worldview make me feel so alone? I was very excited with the launch of version 2.0. Each land, a new region to explore, new skill, new combat. The game felt like a completely different game, and it felt welcome. I loved the shroomlings, I loved the new area, and I loved the direction towards the game hinted it was going. Old, forgotten gods. False wants to replace them by people who have their own agenda. Deception, cults, cruelty, and then a cliffhanger that promised to deliver. I ate up every second of that. I devoured the lore books. I talked to the NPCs. I theorized on my own. I was so excited about Nikki's world continuously expanding. I loved the Shroomlings. I loved their stories. I loved doing their quests, and they didn't just feel like reskinned humans like the favor sprites or the PCs did from Wishfield. They felt distinct. They had a completely different understanding of the world, and I loved that Nikki never shut them down or belittled them for their beliefs. She played along, and it felt genuine. They reminded me of the machines in Nier Automata, which happens to be my favorite game. So I had really high hopes for Infinity Nikki. Not everything before Easterland was smooth sailing, though. There were tiny fractures that I'd felt in the Wishfield storyline. Something about what the game was saying wasn't really connecting with me, and at that point, I couldn't fully pinpoint what it was. In version 1.5, the game changed its original intro. And yes, that topic has been milked to death at this point, but this matters. So, when the intro was changed, of course, I missed the old intro. I do think it was a better introduction to the world that left you with far fewer questions than the new one does. But what it also did was escalation. It raised the stakes. The story wasn't just about this little part of the Heartcraft kingdom with a mystery about strange coma incidents and characters who disappeared 15 years ago. It wasn't about the personal motivations of the antagonists. No, that was too small. Now the world was ending, and you're presented with this information right as you enter the game. You hear all these voices screaming about the end of the world, and of course, no one wants the end of the world, so you should care, right? The game was no longer about being transported through a portal into this magical world, meeting the people who live in it, slowly forming a relationship with them and the world. No, it was about saving the world, a world that had already been destroyed countless times. And yes, that was always part of the game, that was always part of the Nikki series, but why should a newcomer care? I loved these individual characters. I didn't need these world ending stakes for me to care about them. And at least to me, I feel like smaller conflicts can feel more meaningful because as humans, that's what we can relate to. Of course, no one wants to see the world destroyed, but would you want to save the world because the people living in it matter to you? Or do the people matter because they sustain the world? Infinity Nikki often asks me to look outward, to zoom out. I kept wanting to look inward. I never stopped playing the game. I didn't really have many technical difficulties with 1.5 like a lot of players, so I kept playing. I loved the festival seasons. I found humor in the NPC dialogue. I loved when the characters were being silly and nothing had to make sense. There were some minor hiccups, but I didn't really dislike any patch. Then came version 2.1, Life as a Poem. I had my issues with it as soon as I saw the PV. There was this new character mentioning cycles and all things having a beginning and end, which is fine. What she was saying was standard stuff. And then Nikki mentioned the lines, if life never ended, how would we know the depth of our love for one another? So the game was saying finitude gives something value. And yes, that is a valid position in philosophy, but it's not the only position. And when I could finally play the update and I played through the story, I found myself resisting everything the game was telling me. I don't need my loved ones to die to know I love them. The possibility of loss may intensify love, but loss isn't what creates love. Then there was the imagery of the behemoth dying and becoming a tree. On its own, there's a very old and widespread image, death nourishing new life. Infinity Nikki didn't invent this imagery. You can find similar imagery in ecology, mythology, and literature. The game could be saying nothing is truly wasted. The behemoth dies, but it can nurture the forest. It becomes part of something larger. Death isn't final, it's transformation. Life continues through cycles, and individual endings are meaningful because they contribute to future life. But what I saw was the game asking me to celebrate being replaced. How does life continue if you're no longer there? Why does future life take priority over your own? Doesn't help that throughout the entirety of the 2.1 storyline, I found myself drawing parallels to the horror movie Midsommar. And I know the game wasn't trying to frame their message as horror. Life being a cycle, death leading to rebirth, were ideas presented in that movie too, by a cult. Now, again, the ideas themselves on their own aren't the problem. The reason Midsummer felt unsettling was because the cult was saying these beautiful, hopeful things, but there was something far sinister beyond the surface. And I'm not saying Infinity Nikki had something far more sinister beyond the surface, but that's what it felt like to me. At that time, I did consider quitting the game, but I kept playing. I loved version 2.2, and then we had some filler patches, which I always welcome. Version 2.5 came with the continuation of the 2.0 main story with a brand new area and so much to do, so many new characters, returning characters, and I had so much fun playing that update. But the story of the Parksolians and the dragons and the fate that the Parksolians are born with left me to sit with the same uncomfortable feeling. 2.5 let us take a look at the motivations behind the actions of the villain for 2.0. And I loved that. I loved that we got to take a look at her past, what led her to take these actions, and the game didn't attempt to justify them, which I appreciate because she really did ruin lives. No matter what her motives were, hurting innocent people who had nothing to do with them was never the answer. But she felt like she had no other choice, so I loved that the game showed us her side of the story. Medael was a healer. The Parksolians were tasked with ferrying souls that had already passed to reincarnation, not just Parksolian souls, souls from all over Mirrorland, but they were also afflicted with something known as the soul rift. They would have bouts of intense pain that would get so bad sometimes that some of them didn't even want to go on anymore. At first, it would only set in after middle age, but as time went on, Soul Rift kept afflicting younger and younger Parksolians, even children. And Medael was a healer with empathy. She loved her patients. She wanted to take away their pain. She wanted to do everything she could. So after trying and trying and trying until nothing worked anymore, she finally started to question things. Why must the Parksolians bear this burden of ferrying souls when soul ferrying takes such a huge toll on them? It's not that non soul faring Parksolians are exempt from this soul rift, and later we found out it was a pact made by Parksolians with the dragons. What bothered me was how the Parksolians just accepted this as their fate. I didn't agree with Medael's actions, but when she questioned the ethics of being tasked with such a burden, I found myself agreeing with her. Why should the weight of the world fall on one person or one group of people? And in the final showdown of 2.5, I found myself agreeing with her motive as well. The pact made with the dragons made it so that the Parksolians would only reincarnate as Parksolians. Now, I did find myself questioning the logistics of that. Like, what if their population grows? What if it shrinks? Are new souls created when there are more Parksolians? Or are they recycled from some unfortunate soul from some other part of Mirrorland and now they have to share this fate of being a Parksolian? But what Medael wanted to do was erase the Parksolian souls completely, so they would never enter the cycle of reincarnation. So when they died, it would be final. And the reason I found myself agreeing with that is because when the souls reincarnate, they don't carry any of their past memories. It is said that their soul goes on to a new life, but what defines the soul? If your soul is born as someone else and all your thoughts, your dreams, your relationships, your memories disappear, what is the difference between that new life and any other person? How is that still you? So, why should anyone living care? But Nikki told her that she was taking the choice away from others. Sure, I could agree with that, but did they have a choice to enter the cycle in the first place? That choice was made by others. 2.5 ended with Medail's defeat and departure from the world. When the trailer for 2.6 dropped, I was very excited, as I think most people were, because we were getting a continuation of the main story, and that is rare after a big story update. We were expecting a filler patch, but 2.6 seemed to be the continuation of 2.5. Medael was no longer there, but we would meet her in some form. That's what the trailer promised us. So I went in to play the game with that expectation. 2.6 started with a message about the tide sending ceremony. It is a ceremony when souls are sent off into the reincarnation cycle. And right at the beginning, we are shown souls who don't want to reincarnate. And Nikki is tasked with convincing them to go into the cycle. Immediately, I saw problems with that. If the choice of the souls mattered, why must there only be one right answer, and that should be to go into the reincarnation cycle? But no, the game tells us that this is what the souls truly want. If they say otherwise, they must have some unfinished business. Other than that, there is no reason why someone would not want to enter. We were introduced to a new character, Medail's mentor, who blamed herself for the path Medail went down, but this part wasn't fleshed out at all. I didn't really care for her character. I cared much more about Medail and her relationship with her brother, and a small part of that was presented so beautifully. This patch, along with 2.5, had some of the best music in Infinity Nikki. The release of both 1.6 and 2.6 coincided with Children's Day, celebrated in parts of Asia, and the 2.6 dungeon represented that beautifully. It was made of building blocks. There were swings, kites, windmills, gardens, and flowers planted together by a younger Medael and her little brother. The storytelling here was phenomenal, although my game glitched when I was playing through it for the first time, so I didn't notice that. We got to see another side of Medael, the older sister who wanted to keep her pain to herself and shield her little brother from everything. The little boy's world was happy, colorful. He couldn't see what his sister had to go through, all the pain, a world without color. And I really wish 2.6 took the time to expand on that story because a story about two siblings surviving together, the older one trying to protect the younger one no matter what the cost. That was a very compelling story. It was personal, it was relatable, it was on a human scale. But of course, the game had to raise the stakes. In 2.6, we find out the calamity that took place 5 years ago, ending the lives of many Park Solians, was orchestrated by Medael herself. And I had a hard time believing this characterization. She went down the path she did because she didn't want these people to suffer. Why would she make them meet their end in such a painful manner? If she wanted their suffering to end by erasing their souls, why would she choose such a painful way for them to go? It didn't make any sense. I could see her seeing death as mercy for them, but not like that. I loved the first half of the dungeon, but the second half, the one that focused on Medael and her mentor, the part that reveals the true culprit behind Medael's actions, that part frustrated me so much. Visually, it was stunning, yes. The music even reminded me of Near, but the feelings it evoked were far from it. We're told Medael was deceived by an organization who wanted to revive the Titan King, so they used Medael as a pawn. I guess that is set up for the 2.8 storyline. They had to introduce Mothis somehow, and maybe they have a great story in mind with them, and that's fine. But the issue I take with that is why must Medael be deceived in order to question the cycle? Why couldn't she have come to that conclusion on her own? Every single Park Solian believes in the cycle. Not one dissenter? Really? That's not how the real world works. No matter how noble an idea, there will be people who oppose it. Even though I didn't agree with Medea's actions, I agreed with her questioning. And then this felt like backpedaling. It's like the game didn't want to let you sit with the discomfort of the questions the villain asked. I want to clarify, I did not want Medael to win. I wanted the story to let her question exist. 2.6's story ends with us going back to Medael's home. She was a devout believer in the Parksolian cause. Her little brother had once asked the question if reincarnation was good, and she answered,
Of course. Think about it, Miguel. Reincarnation allows our departed loved ones and friends to return to us one day.
But even if they come back, they won't remember us anymore. I don't like that.
Even if we no longer know each other, at least they'll be living well in some other corner of this world. Life begins anew, each person giving it meaning. It cycles on, never ending.
life continues on, never ending. Those were her original beliefs. And I think that could have been something beautiful because the ones who question an idea, a faith, were often its most devout followers. So I don't think it was wrong for the game to show us that she was the one who had these ideas originally before circumstances forced her to take a second look at everything. But what she said, life goes on, never ending. I can see why one would find hope in that. It is one way to look at the world, but the game presents this as the only way. It's not wrong to find hope in that statement. I can see why one would find comfort in that, but I don't. If memories disappear, if personality disappears, if relationships disappear, what exactly is continuing? Yes, life goes on, but not their life. Many real world religions and beliefs do see endless reincarnation as something good, but many traditions and religions also don't. In many schools of Buddhism, the cycle of rebirth is fundamentally a condition of suffering. The ultimate goal is liberation from it, not its endless continuation. And I'm not saying the game had to choose that school of thought over what it did, but we are shown that this is the ultimate truth. All souls of Mirrorland come to the boneyard to be ferried into their new lives. We are shown the ultimate cosmology of this world, so the game doesn't really leave any room for any other ideas. Some people might want their death to be final. Some people might not find comfort in losing their identity and becoming someone else. Infinity Nikki left no room for those people to exist in its world. For months, I thought I was waiting for Infinity Nikki to tell a story I would finally love. Instead, I realized I was waiting for it to value the same things I value. It kept finding hope in continuity and sacrifice in the world beyond the individual. I kept looking for the person inside the world. Neither of us changed, but understanding that difference helped me understand why every beautiful ending left me feeling completely, strangely alone. I didn't need Infinity Nikki to agree with me. I needed it to let me disagree. But I realized there was no place for someone like me in its world. I would always be just an outsider looking in. So I went from theorizing on my own to just enjoying the clothes, feeling myself detached, realizing I was no longer curious about where the world was going. I don't think Infinity Nikki's message itself is wrong. I think it is a sincere and beautiful expression of hope for many people. But I realized that my own hope looks different. I don't find meaning in the continuation of life alone. I find meaning in the irreplaceable lives that make the continuation worth protecting.